Hello, welcome to this week's Politics South. On today's programme, will the government's loosening up of the planning system mean more homes get built? Or just that local authorities lose control of the whole process? And worries about the Indian variant might soon be raising questions about whether the final unlocking can go ahead next month as planned. But there's no denying the enthusiasm with which many businesses greeted this Monday's step on the roadmap.
For us, our outgoings haven't decreased at any point. The fish still need feeding, all the equipment still has to run, so it costs the same to run this business, whether we're open or shut. So we really need to get the public in, get busy.
So let's meet the two politicians who are here for today's programme. Rosa Bolger is a Labour councillor on West Oxfordshire District Council, and Gillian Keegan is the Conservative MP for Chichester and the Apprenticeships and Skills Minister. Welcome both of you this morning. What have you valued most from this unlocking week? Rosa first.
I think for me, I saw my dad yesterday and I gave him a hug, and I hadn't seen him in over a year. So a big hug from my dad certainly sealed this week for me. That
would have made a difference. Gillian?
Birthday dinner. We've all missed birthdays with friends. So my friend happened to have hers on the 18th of May. So we went out for a birthday dinner, and then mum and dad are still in Liverpool. So that's next weekend.
Something to look forward to. Brilliant. Well, on the day of the great reopening Monday this week, step 3 in the government's roadmap out of lockdown, we sent our reporters out across the region to sample all their new freedoms.
For many, this week is about indoor hospitality reopening. We might have been able to have a drink in a beer garden for a few weeks or so, but the British weather hasn't been kind. It's so much nicer to be warm and cosy inside. But it's not just landlords and pub goers who've been waiting for this day.
We've also seen the return of soft play, much to the delight of these guys behind me. They are taking extra precautions and doing more cleaning in between the play sessions. They're also making sure that people are wearing masks while they're walking around.
So excited to be back open and running. It's lovely to see regular customers coming back. And what's also nice is we've got children here who have never been to indoor play, and it's their first visit, which is great.
Some things just have to be big. Watching Godzilla take on King Kong in front room is one thing, but watching on a big screen, something else altogether. Just as well then that the cinema industry says that this week 3/4 of screens across the UK will open. My money's on Kong.
Another significant return to normal. Football fans being allowed back inside stadia again, including here at AFC Bournemouth as they chase the Championship playoffs. Come on, you cherries!
Group exercise classes are back, and today it's body combat. Wah!
This is our new year, and we're seeing the numbers coming in like that as well. It's been great for us.
And while you could be doing that, you can now do this. Have coffee and cake inside if you're in a group of 6 or from 2 households. And you do need to wear a mask while walking around, but you can take that off while you eat.
If you've been loved up during lockdown and decided to tie the knot, there's good news. Weddings, civil partnerships and receptions can now have up to 30 guests. The same rules apply for things like christenings and bar mitzvahs. For funerals, there's no upper limit on numbers now. That's determined by how many people the venue can safely accommodate with social distancing. Wakes are still limited to 30 people though.
Noisy pubs, raucous restaurants, booming cinema screens. All great, of course. But what I'm missing most of all is a chance for a night away from home and a stay in a beautiful hotel in a bed which I won't have to make in the morning.
And just in time for the upcoming half-term holiday, family-themed days out are back on the menu. So for places like the National Motor Museum here in Bewley, it's full steam ahead for now, for this stage of coming out of lockdown.
And indoor attractions like this one, the Blue Reef Aquarium in Southsea, can welcome visitors back again. For those places with mouths to feed, the income is vital.
Most of the fish, to be honest, haven't cared one way or the other. As long as they get fed, they're quite happy. In the display behind me, there is Pinky and Peanut, our giant gouramis. They are very keen to have attention lavished on them by the public again.
I thought he looked hungry. Gillian Keegan, I guess lots of people are just happy to see a bit more money coming into the tills now. What's it been like in Sussex? What's the economic revival this week like?
Well, it's started to open up. I've just been to a deer farm, actually, earlier on. I think the weather's horrendous, right? I mean, we were nearly blown over. So actually being able to come indoors, but clearly it's still not completely back to normal because we still have social distancing indoors. Most of the restaurants and bars and pubs, they haven't got their full complement yet back. But, I think with this pandemic, it's been such an economic disruption, such a shock and terrible things have happened over the last 14 months. But just being able to take those small, cautious steps back towards normality. Also knowing, 70% of us now have received our first dose and 40% second dose. So, I think we're hopeful for the future. I think there's a lot of hope now that we'll get back to normal for the summer.
Of course, there's hope, Rosa. Are they taking the staff back in Oxfordshire? That's an important thing, isn't it?
Of course it is, yeah. So obviously, a lot of people have lost jobs, changed jobs, things like that over the last year or so. I think if in Witney, for example, if you walk down the high street, we can see shops that have disappeared over the last year. And those empty shops are really disheartening to see. The cafes are lively again, and that's wonderful. But those small, especially the independent businesses, are going to need lots of ongoing support. That can't end now. That's got to continue.
Yeah, and Gatwick, Gillian, there's been so much talk this week about foreign travel. It is so important for them to be able to know where the roadmap's going to take them, and we still don't, do we?
No, we don't. Obviously the Indian variant is, relatively new. Obviously, we've got the surge vaccination, surge testing, and we're hoping that that's going to be enough. We still don't know enough about the transmissibility rate. That's why we're being very cautious. We'll know more probably in about a week's time. And that's why we deliberately had these 5 weeks between each of the unlocking. And that was even before any new variants. But of course, they can come up at any time to basically look at the impact of unlocking or the impact of new variants and to be able to take those measures more cautiously. Gatwick and Heathrow obviously are going to be hoping very much that we'll be able to get more flights on and more places open in the summer. But at the moment, we don't know that.
Right. OK, well,
we will in a couple of weeks.
And we'll be guided by the experts. Let's check in with one of those experts. There's a lot of talk, of course, about whether we can safely move ahead to step 4 of the roadmap. It's at the end of next month. And it's the spread of this so-called Indian variant that's causing the uncertainty, as Gillian was saying. Well, joining us now is Dr. Simon Clarke, Professor of Cellular Microbiology at the University of Reading. 3,000 cases of the Indian variant, the Health Secretary said this week. Give us an idea. Is it spreading more quickly, do we think? Is it the virus itself, or is it the way it's come into this country and the communities it's in?
It could be either of those things. We don't have a good enough handle on this yet. It does appear to be spreading more quickly. Quite by how much, I don't think anybody knows. I mean, we heard recently 50% more quickly. I think that's probably at the upper end of estimates. I think Jonathan Van Tam the other day suggested it would be between a few percent and 50%. That's quite a big margin. And we'll find out in due course whether that's due to the innate ability of the virus to spread, or whether it has other factors that push it along, societal factors. But as yet, we don't have a good picture on that.
Can you not study either from the data or by looking at the virus itself, or am I being too naive about this, and say, this looks like a more transmissible one quite quickly?
Not really, no, because you'd have to infect people. Because if you've got an experimental animal, a lab rat, if you want to put it like that, you can't guarantee that your results are going to be the same in humans as they are in the lab animal. So really, you've got to wait for some time to watch these things spread. And that's what happened with the Kent variant.
We're doing experiments on society, aren't we, as we're all living through it, this having to wait for the next stage of the information, the data coming back and all the rest of it. It's an odd sort of science. Do you find?
it's nature that's doing the experiment on society, on us. You know, we wouldn't have it at all if we could get away with that. So it's being inflicted on us by nature, and really we just have to wait to see.
Yeah. What's your hunch, though? I mean, in the south of England, we've got very few cases of this Indian variant. They seem to be, if I'm right, in the Thames Valley, sort of Rushmore, Reading, Bracknell. Will they have doubled? Will it spread everywhere, do you think? Is it inevitable?
It will continue to spread to other places, I'm quite sure. The list we have now won't be exhaustive, I shouldn't think. One thing you can guarantee with this is the situation we're in today will not be where we are this time next week or the week after that. It will change. So we can be sure of that. But I wouldn't want to draw up a list of where it's going to go next. Nobody's really got any way of knowing that.
But the vaccine, I mean, we do know from the evidence that, you know, whether or not it has particular effects on particular variants, the vaccine is helping us in this country greatly, isn't it?
Oh, yes, it's slowing down the spread of the virus and has done hitherto. We know that. It's helped, of course, along with keeping everybody at home, with social distancing, with lockdown.
Which is now changing.
Which is now changing. So we'll see as the virus comes up against just the vaccine, or the vaccine takes a bigger role in stopping its spread, just what effect it has. We hear that the vaccine works against the virus, or the Indian variant. I don't think anybody seriously thinks that wouldn't happen, or would seriously question that. It's whether it works as well or not that is the big question.
Oh, interesting. Right. Rosa Bolger, caution, and also Labour's stance on this. You know, are you supporting the government, or are you picking holes a bit more now in things like giving some certainty to foreign travel?
Sure. Look, I think over the last year, it's been really important that everybody come together. And I think Keir Starmer's done a fantastic job of supporting the government where he sees fit, but challenging it where things are not being done well enough. And I think we need to continue to do that. So far as travel and things, I mean, yes, of course, we're all desperate to get away for a holiday. Maybe we should be thinking about staying locally, supporting our local high streets, or even travelling within the UK. You're
doing what Keir Starmer was criticising Boris Johnson for. Maybe we should think about. Isn't Labour's point that we should have a clear rule on this?
I'm sure Labour should, but, you know, as a councillor in West Oxfordshire, unfortunately, I don't get to make decisions on national travel arrangements. But I think for my local residents, of course, I'd like to see them acting with caution, and I'd like to see them making sure that we're really thinking before we travel, and maybe thinking about spending our money locally and helping that reboost locally instead.
Yeah. Gillian Keegan, what is the point of amber travel areas? Either we could go there or we shouldn't go there, because everybody will otherwise come up with their own interpretation.
Well, amber travel areas are for specific reasons, most importantly, business travel. So business travel is permitted to amber countries, and also there's other exceptions as well. So family serious illness, or a funeral indeed. So there are some specific reasons. And most
If I pick up some souvenirs in the duty free on the way back, is that business travel?
No, definitely not. That's picking up souvenirs. But I think, and by the way...
Someone will try it on.
Well, I mean, look, if you are determined to go abroad to one of the amber list countries, then you know, there isn't anything in legislation stopping you going. So there is this era of personal responsibility from the 17th of May, and we have to cross this Rubicon at some point. You know, we can't be getting the decisions made by government all the time. So that's a deliberate step as part of our unlocking. But you know, if somebody's determined to go, then they obviously have to quarantine. Where they will come up against difficulties is they will. There's many more enforcements. There's 1,000 visits a day by police checking that people are actually quarantining at home.
Are there? 1,000 a day?
Yeah, amber list still, and there's been 4.5 million by the Border Force. So, you know, they will, amber list countries, you still have to take a negative test. You still have to take the test day 2 and day 8 as you come back, and you have to quarantine at home for 10 days. And you only got the guidance. The rules around it is to say just go for business or for family, specific family reasons like serious illness or a funeral or those kind of exceptional cases.
So, Simon, let's just... Sorry, can we just bring our expert back in? Simon,
patients.
OK, so I know you're a scientist here, but do you think it's clear enough yourself? Is it cautious enough, and is it clear enough?
As regards clarity, I mean, I only found out the other day that about amber list not being for general leisure travel, when a minister in the House of Lords said that travel really wasn't for this year. I was quite taken aback. I think really that should have been made clear from the outset, and I don't think it was. As regards, as for caution, I think we'll see just how cautious things are when more countries are added onto the list and why they're added onto the list.
Yeah.
I think that remains to be seen.
Do we need some more transparency in all this, Rosa?
Absolutely. And actually, Peter, what's really good is you've brought Simon back in there, because what I think us politicians should be doing is piping down slightly and let the experts speak. Let's be listening to the scientists and listening to the data. Absolutely.
But to be fair, and Gillian, you can have the last word on this one, you are trying to say to people a bit more, to work it out for yourself. Now, that could go badly wrong, or do you just trust the British people?
Well, we have the toughest, some of the toughest measures at our borders. So, as I said, if you do go to one of those amber list countries, you will have to take a negative test before you get on the plane to come back. You will have to take a test on day 2 and day 8, all at your own expense. And you will have to quarantine in your house. If it's a red list country, it's a quarantine in a hotel. And we are checking more and more people. And if you are breaching it, it will be a £10,000 fine. So it really will be a very expensive decision. What we're saying is, in a couple of weeks, we will have a much clearer understanding. And the 21st of June date has been the date for a long time now in the roadmap. And that's when we will have more of an idea, if there are any more green countries. There's 12 countries on the green list today. It isn't
some uninhabited islands as well. But let's see how it changes. Simon, thank you very much for joining us with your expertise. Let you get on with your day. Now, still to come, you must be having a laugh. The stand-up comedians finding humour in lockdown. There aren't many things that have survived essentially unchanged since the war, but the planning system, with local planning authorities deciding on what you can build, what you can't build, is one of them. But the government has plans to change that.
Laws to modernise the planning system so that more homes can be built will be brought forward.
The government hopes that by loosening up the planning regime, they'll meet their target of building 300,000 new homes a year. At the moment, we're only managing about 190,000. And the current system can be time-consuming and held up by NIMBYism. But critics say the government's reforms will make it much harder for local authorities to control what gets built where. And by doing away with the community infrastructure levy, making sure affordable housing targets are met will be that much harder too. Rosa Bolger, Oxfordshire has a lot of controversy, hasn't it, over house building? How's this going to go down?
Certainly does. So, well, I think, look, the first thing we need to think about when we're talking about house building is what kind of houses we're building. We're in a climate crisis, and there's not being enough action taken on the sort of buildings we can currently build, and the regulations around making sure they're helping protect our climate and fight back from this crisis. Obviously, people are concerned about where houses are being built. And again, the climate is a big part of that. In Witney, we saw incredible flooding over Christmas. And the residents very much took that to heart when they voted in the elections just gone. And the ward particular that's going to see a lot of new houses saw a big change in their representatives there. And that's because of who has and who hasn't supported development. I think when we talk about planning and we talk about the changes in these laws, what we're not talking about enough is engagement and how we're communicating with our communities and our local residents.
Right, so what the government says is only 3% of local people currently engage with the planning system. So are these changes they're making going to get people more involved, do you think?
I'm not sure, but you're right. You know, people don't get involved. But what the evidence does show is that once people do become involved in the planning process locally, they continue to be involved and they want to continue to be involved. One of the things that's happened over the last year is that digital technology has become the norm for many people. Obviously not everyone, but it means that when we do engagement and consultations, we can have greater inclusion and greater diversity, and we can really get a better scope for what a community wants to see in its area. That builds greater trust and builds greater communities, and that's something we should be really focusing on.
Gillian Keegan, the House of Commons' own research. I mean, nobody's saying we shouldn't be building houses, but it's suggesting that they might go in the wrong place, more in small villages than in larger towns as a result of these changes.
Well, I think that also depends on the local plans. I mean, I agree with what Rosa said there about improving the engagement, using digital platforms to do that as well. We've all gotten used to that technology. You know, planning is a very difficult issue, but we haven't updated our planning system since 1947. So it does seem like it is worthwhile looking at how we can make it work better. Obviously, local plans, what we want is for the local plans to work a lot better. Today, I mean, 60% of the areas don't have their local plan adopted. It takes on average 7 years to get the local plan adopted. And, you know, it's incredibly difficult process. So the local plan is really an important part of it. And we want to try and, you know, keep that element, but make it work a lot better and simplify how we work with the local plan. It is always about the type of houses you're building as well, and I think giving more local control over that is important, because what we need is houses that people can afford, not mansions as they're called.
Let me test one idea out on you. Some of the shops are struggling. Rosa was telling us in Witney there's a lot of empty shops. Could they be turned into houses?
That's another part of it to try and, I mean, we know that for a while our high street has been changing as the way we shop changes. So that is another part of it too. At the moment, you have to market a business for a long time before you can ask for a change of use. I think it's 2 years. Rosa may know that better. But, you know, it's trying to make that easier to do if it's obvious that it would benefit from being residential. And actually mixed residential and mixed entertainment, residential and shops is probably what most people would see as the future for our house.
It's not going to help the town centres, though, is it? If all the current shops get turned into houses. Rosa Bolter.
No, definitely not. You've definitely got to have a blend.
Right, Rosa.
Yeah, I don't think we should be turning shops or businesses into housing, but we should certainly be incorporating it so people are living nearer the places that they work or where they socialise. You know, what we've seen through this, and as we talk about changes in planning and changes to the built environment, we've seen a lot of these low traffic neighbourhoods coming up. Oxford is a great example of where they've happened. And we're really bringing people, you know, people are spending a lot more time at home and are really spending more time in their communities. We protect the climate if we live closer to where we shop and work and everything else. And if we can have a greater mix, then absolutely. But Gillian makes a good point. What we need is affordable housing. We need housing that people can properly afford, and not just this word affordable housing, properly affordable housing. And also housing where we can maybe have co-ownership, cooperative housing and that sort of thing. So really being creative with what we're doing.
Actually getting things built. Rather than, all the objections we've had so far. Now, let's take a look at some of the other stories that have been hitting the political funny bone this week. After the year we've all had, we could do with a laugh.
Well, the government has said that all vaccines will be administered by June. But if you ask me, that's a lot of work for one woman.
Comedians like Daniel Edison from Havant did those online gigs, of course. But with Buckinghamshire's Mary Burke this week finally got a live audience.
Are you like me? Do you think the lockdown's become too commercialised? Do you think it's... Do you miss the old-fashioned lockdowns you used to have, you know? The rainbows and the banana bread and the Joe Wicks, you know, and it was really quiet and lovely. It's all just gotten too commercial, and it seems to start earlier and earlier every year, doesn't it?
So much was restarting. Coach trips like this one from Hampshire to the Lake District.
We've had our injections, we've had the tubes, so we thought we'd go.
And cruises, MSC Virtuosa, the first to leave the UK from Southampton.
I can take my mask off and I can have my first drink on a ship in, I can't remember when.
But there's no movement in some plans. The Ministry of Justice rejected Reading Council's scheme to turn the historic jail into an arts venue. And flood alleviation in Oxford will have to wait until the Kennington Bridge is replaced in 2026. flood of unlocking, but maybe not enough in some places. Gillian Keegan, where would you like to give a bit of a shove and say, get on with things a bit more quickly, rather than maybe hiding behind the restrictions we've had to put up with through the COVID?
You mean in terms of unlocking?
Possibly, yeah. Business getting going again. I mean, the flood scheme there that's being delayed. The Reading jail, you know, they wanted to make it into an arts centre. Now the Ministry of Justice still can't get it all sorted out. I mean, maybe there are good reasons for things not changing, but some things are just getting stuck.
OK, there are things getting stuck, and there's a very deliberate plan that the government has, which is in 3 big areas, because we've got a lot to catch up. Courts is one, right? So there's a lot of courts. Cancer treatment and access to loads of different medical services. Of course, they've been impacted, so we really do need to catch up. And then the other big thing is kids and kids' education, actually at all age, that catch up as well. So they're the 3 focuses of the government. I think it's a bit early to say, shoving people. I mean, we really only unlocked, on last Monday in terms of this next stage of being able to go indoors and into people's houses and stay overnight at our parents.
But you've got to think ahead, haven't we?
We have, and there's an awful lot of focus on thinking ahead. And, we've got education catch-ups we've got lots of people looking at this at the moment. So, yes, there are a lot of plans. And, of course, a lot of this takes people as well. And this is the other thing, the skills agenda that I'm responsible for. A lot of the things that we need to do, you need to have the people to do them as well. So it is going to be a while, and we will be catching up from the fallout of this pandemic for a while.
Yeah. Rosa Bulger, it's so important, isn't it, to get wages into people's pockets as well, to get things moving. But, where would you like to give a shove to?
Absolutely. So I think what we need to see is we need to see things continuing to open cautiously. I'm just below 40 still, and I haven't had my first vaccine. It is booked next week, but I haven't had it yet. And there's lots of people, obviously, my age and younger, that will not have had it either. So I think we do need to be really cautious. But you're right. We need to not be using the excuse of COVID and the excuse of the lockdown to be delaying important things, like Gillian mentioned, education, but also things like tackling the climate crisis, adult social care, and NHS appointments, things like that. We need to really get those.
What about politics? Have your council meetings, they've had to go back to real rather than virtual, haven't they?
Yeah, really disappointing decision by the government, I think, to make us all go back. The reason for this, Peter, is virtual meetings or a hybrid approach is so much more inclusive. What we see in local government particularly is a real lack of diversity. And what we also see is that to improve inclusion and diversity within the council chamber, hybrid meetings are a big part of that. So for me, for example, I can put my children to bed and join a council meeting, or I can pay for a babysitter to come along and then go to a council meeting in person. Okay. If I couldn't afford a babysitter, that would limit me from being a councillor.
Well,
so that's
both
really
of you,
important to know these things.
Thank you for joining us. Sorry, Gillian, we've run out of time. Thank you, both of you, for joining us from home. That's another thing we can do still, which we might keep going. Thank you to my guests. We're off next week, but back in a fortnight. Goodbye.